for the City of White Rock. I am the chairperson, Joe Moeco, and we have, of course, our regular panel with us. I'd first like to, just by virtue of all the buttons on the bottom of my screen, I'd like to welcome the many members of the public to this meeting, and just would like to let you know that this meeting will be recorded and ultimately posted onto the City of White Rock's channel so that it will be available to the public. And I would also like to remind members of the public that the purpose of the advisory design panel is essentially for peer review of applications that will go in front of mayor and council, and it's not an opportunity for the public to speak. If you do have any questions about the proposals, please feel free to reach out to either Greg or the appropriate planning representative. And if these projects do end up going to mayor and council, I'm sure there will be an opportunity at a public hearing to speak to any of your concerns. From there, I would like to adopt the agenda. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as pre-circulated?
Moved.
Yeah.
Seconded, Rushier.
Yeah, second.
All in favor, presumed. Thank you. So the agenda has been adopted as circulated with the two items primarily. Next is the adoption of the minutes or the approval of the minutes that were sent by draft by Greg. Assuming the panel has had a chance to review these minutes, are there any issues or any amendments or any errors that anyone has detected?
Move approval.
Thank you, Paul. Seconded by Phil. So unless we have opposed, the minutes as circulated are approved. So we have two projects on our agenda today. The first one is 1441 Vidal Street. We, of course, are no strangers to this particular address, and I do believe that this is the panel's third time reviewing this particular project. That said, I think that as a panel, we've had a really good and clear, or we've developed a clear understanding of the urban design parameters, the context of this particular project. So I'd like to just pass it over to Greg and eventually the proponents, Greg, to introduce the project more fully. And then we can start in with some general comments with some additional commentary. So Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure before I start that everyone can see that. Can everyone see the sort of presentation screen?
I can see it.
Okay. Yeah, so as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, this is the third time the application has come before the advisory design panel. It is a revised submission. It was presented to the panel last month and has since been revised based on both the feedback from the panel as well as some of the changing underlying policy framework. So as I had mentioned in the last presentation, the city is undertaking a review of its official community plan, and that's leading to some changes to the policies within the town center transition land use designation, which applies to these properties. So the applicant, on the basis of knowing that the path that the policy framework's taking, they've gone back to revisit the nature and scope of their application. So with that, I'm going to I'll keep a fairly high level presentation. I did get into more of the details at the last meeting. I will leave those details out, but we can certainly go into those if you wish later. So this slide just highlights the properties that are subject to this application immediately south of the Beverly building on Vidal Street. The original application and the nature of the applications today are zoning bylaw amendment and a major development permit that we received in 2019. The original proposal, as you can see there, was for 129 rental units within a 6-story building over a 3-story parkade. They had initially 180 parking stalls proposed, and back when it was initially reviewed by the panel, there were a number of changes requested. Those changes, most of those changes were made, and then, as I say, the applicant, stemming from the last meeting and the timing of some ongoing policy changes, has since revisited their project And so the current submission is for an 82-unit stratified building. So it's no longer rental tenure as proposed. It would be stratified. And you can see the unit makeup in the slide there. It would now be a 4-story wood frame building over top of a 3-story concrete parkade. 127 parking stalls, which would meet the supply requirement of the zoning bylaw. And then further to some of the other discussions and feedback from the ADP, all stalls would be roughed in for electric vehicle charging, with stage 2, 12 stalls being provided the actual stage 2 charge. And the process to date, we had a public information meeting back in August of last year. The panel, you can see here the dates that the panels reviewed the file. Moving forward, if the panel is supportive of the project, we would work with the applicant on preparing a zoning amendment bylaw to present to the Land Use and Planning Committee for first and second reading. It would be a recommendation through the committee to council. We would then have a public hearing, so all those members of the public that are joining us tonight that may want to have comments direct to council, that would be their opportunity. With COVID, it would be a call-in approach to providing comments to council, but that would be the next major milestone in terms of the public's opportunity to comment. And then stemming from that, council could give the bylaw a third reading, which typically comes with conditions like the demolition of existing structures on the property and execution of engineering servicing agreements, that sort of thing. And then they could proceed to building permits once they get final approval of the zoning. So with that, Mr. Chair, we can turn it over to the applicant to go through the revised submission and open it up to the panel's comments.
Sounds good. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. I'll just share my screen here.
Perfect. Thanks, Lucas.
All right. Could you please, just for the record and for our guests, kindly introduce yourselves?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
So again, good seeing you all again. I'm Lucas Whitquist from Keystone Architecture, the project manager of the development, and Eric Poxley with me here is the architect of record. He'll jump in on the presentation when we get to the exterior design items. So yeah, just after the May 18th ADP meeting, we came away from the meeting and we met with the client and the team, and the client made a decision to pursue the 4-story option that was presented towards the end of that last ADP meeting. So we've pared down this presentation to really focus on the changes from the 5-story option that we presented to you last, to really focus on the 4-story option and the differences between the two. So I'll get into it here. Just some of the overall project statistic. The site area obviously hasn't changed. Building area remains the same as well because the lower floors of the building haven't changed. So the lot coverage stays at 43% as it was in the last design. The gross floor area for the residential portion of the building has been reduced from 77,500 square feet to just over 62,000 square feet. And the gross floor area of the parkades has been reduced from 79,000 square feet to just over 64,000 square feet. This is a bit more of a detailed floor area breakdown, but just want to note that the indoor amenity space is the same as it was with the initial design, even though there's reduced units. The outdoor amenity space has been reduced somewhat on the 4th floor. And we'll get into that when I bring up the plan in a little bit, but it came down from around 6,800 square feet to just over 5,000 square feet. The unit count has been reduced from 103 units to 82 units. The majority of the units that we pulled out were 1-bedroom units. The 3 bedrooms went from 21 units to 17 in this building. So we lost 4 3-bed units. All the rest of the units were 1-bed units. This is just a breakdown of some of the overriding changes. So from a programming perspective, one full floor level has been removed from the building. So it brings it down from 5 stories to 4 stories. The number of units, as I mentioned, have been reduced from 103 to 82. We added 1 unit on the 4th floor level, which I'll point out when we get to that floor plan level. We took a look at some of the unit layouts and we removed some of the jogs that were raised as a concern at the last meeting. Rooftop amenity has been extended due to that 1 unit that we added on the 4th floor. We kind of realigned things on that level to get some of the communal outdoor amenity space back that we lost due to the adding of the unit. Parkade has been reduced on the P3 level. I'll show you that on the parkade plan. And the bike storage has been reduced as well. As the requirement came down, we reduced the amount that we're providing. From a design standpoint, Eric will get into this in a bit more detail when we're looking at the exteriors, but at a high level, additional wood elements added in order to soften the elevations further, more distinctive and refined corner window elements with additional openings, exterior panel cladding and patterning further refined to further resolve the flat elevations, railing patterning and color and materiality adjusted to better match the exterior design materials. Further extended the parquet setback around the trees that we're retaining. We have a slide on that, so I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. And reviewed the design with the structural engineer for the rooftop planters that we're providing. So we did have a conversation with the structural engineer. They did a review of the medium, growing medium weight on the rooftop, and they're confident that they can accommodate that in their design. The site plan just brought this up just to point out that there really is no change to the site plan. The main entry to the building is still located the center point of the building off of Vidal, parquet entry maintained in the same location, just a little bit further south. So the tree retention I mentioned, because we were reducing the amount of parking provided as the requirement came down, we were able to adjust things in the parquet to pull the walls further away from the existing trees along the north and the west sides. Just noting that with our 5-story option, we were staying outside of the root protection area, but obviously any additional space and buffer space that we can give those trees is the better and important. So we've managed to pull it back a few feet on both the north and the west to give a bit more buffer space for the tree roots. These are parquet plans, so I'm just showing these 2 levels because it's really the only ones that have changed. The P2 level is only adjusted because we've had to relocate the access gate, just splitting up the visitor parking and the residential parking a little bit differently. The big change to the parquets is that the P3 level, with our last concept, it kept wrapping around down further into the ground in this area here. All of that's been now removed as a parking requirement. Came down. So the parking requirement for the 82 units is 123 stalls. We're providing 127, so we're still over the bylaw requirement. Greg mentioned the EV parking. We require 12 now, which we're providing, and we are still going to be dropping in all stalls to be EV in the future, which will consist of conduit to the stalls as well as electrical power to the building being adequate for future EV charging stalls for all the stalls. Skipping ahead to the 4th level plan, as I mentioned, all the lower level plans are basically the same other than the one that we pulled out. This is the unit that we added on the 4th floor, just to the south. So there's 8 units on this level now, 9 units instead of the 8 that we had previously provided. This was the outdoor amenity space previously, so you can see it got shrunk down because of the added unit, but we've incorporated more outdoor amenity space by reducing the private outdoor space along this portion of the building. So again, we've reduced the outdoor amenity space from around 6,800 square feet to around 5,200 square feet. But obviously the number of units in the buildings come down as well. So we're still maintaining the tiering of the building down towards the west side. So it's 4 stories facing Vidal Street along this portion, but it does tier down to just 3 residential floors along the west property line. This cross-section kind of just showed that. So this is a east-west cross-section through the building. These are the 3 levels of residential facing the western neighboring property, and then it steps up to 4 stories on the Bylaw Street here. Eric, jump in here on the exterior.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. So really just some alterations and refinements to the design that was presented at the last ADP that sort of we felt sort of accommodates the smaller scale building, the 4-story product, and as well sort of to bring a bit more of a low scale residential expression along the street. So this elevation doesn't show it as much, but we've started to integrate a little bit more material articulation, mostly along the ground plane. Maybe go to the next level, and then the end elevations, the north and south, sort of creating a little bit more material articulation, a little bit more wood element, and then creating these sort of corner window units, again, to sort of address a little bit more lower scale residential expression on the building. Of course, the cascading deck design, we felt as it gets scaled down, continues to reduce the scale on the south end and give a feeling of a 1 or 2 or 3 story building rather than even a 4-story. This is just an image that kind of shows the comparison with the building to the north in terms of scale and proportion. Another image that kind of articulates a little bit the reduced height and massing of the building. This is a view from the northwest, showing some of the just the experience for residents on the balconies, and as well just the view from some of the neighboring properties. In terms of materials, we added a little bit more wood elements to warm up the facade a little bit. Strengthened some of the detailing along the ground plane to create that sort of townhouse entry feel along the street. Otherwise, most of the materiality is generally the same, just a little bit more refined, a little more detail. And then here's just a shot of the lobby that kind of demonstrates that. And along the next slide, the sort of ground floor units that show an entry expression.
Yeah, this just highlights where we were with the 5-story option. I think this slide was in the last presentation. You've probably seen this. It just highlights the difference in massing between the 5-story option and the 4-story option from both the Vidal frontage and then the neighboring property to the west as well. Right, we'll let Van der Zand jump in here on the landscape.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. For landscape, I'll introduce myself. I'm Stephen Heller. I'm the landscape architect with VDZ. My colleague Dave Yerke did the presentation at the last one, but you may remember me from the first time at the panel. So I'm happy to be here again and see the progression of this project. Lucas, if you want to flip, I think I'll mainly just speak to level 4 and the changes that are involved on that level. You've already covered the tree protection, and that was really the two areas that changed on our plan was the tree protection, as Lucas mentioned, pulling in the parkade boundary around the trees. So we updated our tree protection plan with the arborist report. And then we've modified the level 4, obviously, with the reduction of a story off of here. So Lucas mentioned that there was an additional unit added on the south side. So that was originally outdoor amenity space. And so what we did is we looked at reclaiming the amenity space kind of right adjacent to the elevator is what made the most sense to convert from it was a private patio, but to convert that to additional outdoor amenity made sense, because then anybody coming from the lower floors can come right out of that elevator and have direct access to the outdoor amenity. We also made sure that we could pull, there's a door just to the right or the south of that elevator bank that leads, that's the entrance to the outdoor amenity. We worked with the architects to make sure that that still opens on to both areas of the amenity, because with the addition of that unit, that was a longer hallway, and we wanted to make sure that there was flow to connect the two patios rather than having them be separated with two different doors. So that was part of this redesign exercise. But looking at the amenity on the rooftop, we wanted to maintain the same full level of programming that we had in the larger space, even though we've shrunk and we have sort of two different spaces now. But in the original design, we did have outdoor seating, we had barbecue, we had social space for more the adult range and social evening type gathering, and we also had a child's friendly play space with the play elements that you can see on the screen here. So we've now maintained both of those program elements. The area around the elevator bank is more the social gathering, adult oriented space now. So we have our fire pit, our fire ring with a fire table and seating around it. We have the larger outdoor kitchen with overhead trellis, and then a larger dining table in that space to round out the social gathering space. And then to the south, the open area there, we've got the play space with the two play elements. There's a picnic table with immediate adjacency for parents or caregivers that might be watching over the children as they play. And then another smaller lounge seating just to take advantage of the immediate view to the south. So there's still a variety of areas for seating and gathering on this space, and then maintaining, as I mentioned, the same amount and the same features of programming that we had in the previous design. I know two of the comments from the last round of ADP, one of them was the tree volume, and looking at the planters and the tree locations, we've tried to give the trees that are on this level looking at the planters and make sure that we could pull the walls out, give them as much soil volume as possible. That is always a challenge on rooftops, but we've tried to give them as much soil volume. And I apologize, our graphics here, we should have added a little more opacity to the tree so you could actually see the planter layout below, but there are bump outs where most of the trees are to provide as much soil volume as possible. And the other comment was just the breakout between the larger patio that was open to all residents of the building versus the private patios that are along the west side. I know it's kind of a unique design in that sense too, but again, reclaiming some more of that space around the elevator. We've tried to claw back as much space and keep this rooftop amenity open to all of the residents versus sectioning it off for the private residents. But I mean, that said, the 5 or 6 patios that are private are associated with the upper level units, so they each have access through the hallway to a door, and they're private patios. And just to provide, I guess, a little more variety and price point, I suppose, from the marketing perspective, we've added programming to at least the larger patios where it makes sense. We wanted to provide built-in outdoor barbecues for those patios, so that there's another amenity, another program element for those private patios on the rooftop. But the main focus was, as I mentioned, on just clawing back as much space with the revised building footprint on level 4 to maintain as a public amenity for all of the buildings. So.
Great. Thanks, Stephen.
Great, thank you. So was there anything else from Keystone to add to Stephen's presentation, or can I move forward?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. So panel, the next stage here is going to be to go to a round of questions. And then before we go on to comments, have the proponent address those questions. So is there anyone who has any requirements for clarification or have any specific questions about the proposal? First hand up is Phil. Phil, go ahead. Phil, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
You're good.
It's a question about, as you know, I've raised questions about the preservation of the trees on the north and the west side, and to ensure that the design doesn't potentially compromise their viability. So I appreciate, first of all, I appreciate the changes, and by reducing the height and the number of units, has had a positive, in my view, ripple effect on things such as the effect on the parkade. So my question for clarification is, and it's very difficult for me to look at the details on some of the dimensions. It appears to me that P3 has been pulled back. In other words, the walls, the concrete walls for P3 have been pulled back. So my question is, but it doesn't appear that the concrete walls for P1 and P2 have been pulled back on the north and the west side. Am I correct? Or have they also been pulled back? And if so, how much?
They should all have been pulled back, or else it doesn't, the increased setback doesn't work on one level. It needs to be on all levels. So I would need to open up the drawing to take a look at that. If it hasn't been pulled back on all sides, on all levels, it will be for sure. Yeah, no, it needs to be pulled back on all levels for it to obviously not impact the roof zone. So that's something that we'll definitely take a look at and confirm that it's on all levels.
Just to be clear, just from the presentation drawings alone, I think that Phil's comment is accurate, that the footprint for P3 is different than P2 and P1. So yeah, when you dig into that, perhaps while you're hearing other comments and questions, obviously the foundation doesn't have to be vertical on all walls, but I think that's where his question is coming from.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question for sure. So we will look into that, but it will be on all levels. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would want to constrain you to that.
Yeah, that seems not possible. So
it might be possible, but it's not just that. But if P1, for example, can't be pulled back, or P2, because that may start constraining other things, is that the critical issue is what is the wall, even if P3 is the only one that can be pulled back, that may affect the foundation of the viability of the foundation for P1 and P2. So I don't know, again, that's a structural engineer would have to comment on that. Anyway, that's my question. So it's unclear now, but it would be nice to be, because to me, the critical issue is to have that information, not whether it affects my, what else I say, I don't know. But in terms of questions, can you go over one of the key issues for design for us is the deep the guidelines that we're operating under, the 22.6 on the area guidelines. So 22.6.28, 22.6.1 talks about West Coast design elements. And I have a good feeling that you're trying to do that, but I'll just put, it's sort of a comment and question, is to make sure that we are clear that with the various changes that you've made, and a number have been a lot of changes, not just height and so on, but in the more clarification about things like materials, that we have a clear understanding of how this fits in with the West Coast, what might be called West Coast design elements. So maybe it's a question for or an opportunity for the architects to make a comment about that.
Yeah, I think you're right, that is something, as you scale the building down, there may be some, we've lost a few elements that would have been more enhancing that sort of typology. But I think what we've done is we've sort of maintained the strength of the design in terms of its sort of cantilevered, cascading sort of horizontality of the design, and maintained sort of the stone, glass, wood elements that we felt sort of reflected what the guidelines asked for.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I've got you next, Paul. Phil, are you wrapped up with questions? Okay. So Paul,
this has to do with Phil's question about the parking walls. The lower one, of course, is pulled back, but the other two don't appear to be pulled back. Am I correct in assuming that?
That's how I read it. But, yeah.
The drawing, you're right. That is how it's drawn on the drawing, and that's shown incorrectly. So, like I said, it will be pulled back on all levels. We have room to push the parquet a little bit deeper again if we need to get back a few extra stalls that we would lose by moving that wall back. So it will be pulled back on all levels.
Okay, then to the landscape architect, they've done a wonderful job preserving the large trees in this neighborhood. They're all surrounded by townhouses. And even across Oxford, there's some fairly large trees preserved there as well. What I'd like to ask is, when you do a deep excavation like this, how does that affect the water table and these trees? Because the existing trees aren't really having to deal with a deep excavation. In this case, and this is something that's way out of my league, but I was there today, and it made me question whether this deep excavation could affect the water table to such an extent that these trees could suffer. That's all I had to ask about that for now. Thank you.
All right. So Stephen, do you have a reply for that?
It's an interesting question, obviously, in development sites and redeveloping neighborhoods like this too. It's something that to be honest, I don't have a direct response to either, but we could certainly provide a response maybe back through planning, and I'd be interested to talk to the geotech a little bit too about what the water table is in this site and get a more clear response to that comment.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, that is Greg.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you. I knew that trees were going to be a topic of interest, so I had intentionally yesterday met with our agricultural technician, who's a certified arborist, to talk about the parkade notching, the proximity of the edge of the drip line of these trees on the west and on the north to the actual location of the parkade walls as presented in the drawings that you have. So I appreciate that Keystone is going to look at further notching, but the opinion of our arboricultural technician was that there are methods that can be used to ensure that the trees continue to receive moisture. The concern is that you end up exposing roots, you get root burn, or what happens is all the moisture that the roots are holding get lost because you've now exposed a large portion of the side of the roots. So we would, through the tree management permit process, require the implementation of certain controls. Just reading my notes here, controls to retain soil on the cut face and to avoid the loss of moisture. So those are things for the panels, maybe level of comfort, that we would be looking at through controls in the tree management permit.
Great. Thank you. And
so just jumping in, I'm going to jump in here again because I think there's a bit of confusion here on the parkade cutback item. So P3 along the north and the west has been pulled back entirely because we took out like 20 stalls. So that's not what we're projecting all the way up through the upper levels. So on P2 and P1, we managed to pull back the parkade wall by a couple of feet. So it's not going to align with what's happening on P3. It's going to be pulled back a few extra feet to give the tree roots a bit more space than what we were doing before. So the drawings are shown correctly. The parkade walls are shown in the correct space. It's just not going to align with P3. Does that clarify that?
That does, and just as a point of note, perhaps in future submissions, when we're scrolling through the PDFs of these drawings, the plans aren't sitting on top of one another. There's no grid lines. You might avoid those questions because they jump around the page. Just a side note.
Fair comment. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the panel? Paul, your hand is still up. Did you have an additional question?
No, I don't. Thanks.
Okay. Any other panel? Oh, I've got a panel member, Rashir. Rashir, questions?
Yeah, I have two questions. First, from the landscape architect on the roof plan amenity area, if you could, please. If you could show that plan, please.
Sure. Yeah, I can bring it up.
Thank you. So, yeah, there was a big discussion and a comment from the panel that those private courtyards, private spaces to be converted into usable area, and you've done a reasonable job of adding that area. There was also, I guess, a requirement raised by the panel about having some sort of enclosure where tables, chairs, equipment, maintenance equipment, etc., could be kept. I don't see that you've addressed that. Have you, or am I missing something? Or
no, that's right. I do remember that comment from the last time around. Unless Lucas can comment, I don't believe we've accounted for storage space.
Not at this level, but with the changes to the parkade again and the reduction of the parking stalls there, we did open up a bit more storage space at the parkade levels. And with obviously the amenity space now wrapping around the elevators, it's relatively convenient to move stuff into the elevator down to the parkade levels was our thought there.
It makes a lot of sense. You've got so much of terrace area given to private decks. If a little bit of small storage area could be carved out of that, it would have been much more simpler rather than to kind of attribute to that space in the parkade level, I would think, but that's fine. That was one question. The next one is if you could show me the drawing ADP 4.07.
Stephen, are you wanting to stop sharing and I'll share mine?
Yeah, thanks, Lucas.
Sorry, which sheet was that?
ADP 4.07, the previous one. Yes, thank you. Now, on the elevation, and you've done a little bit of a legend there, I see some longboards. There are some longboard in the soffit area that you've shown. There's also the top level, the fascia seems to be an amalgamation of a wood and a gray element. Can you talk about that? How it is and what kind of detail are you using there?
Well, that fascia basically is a wood simulated or wood fascia, and the part that's the gray part would be the flashing on the roof parapet.
Perhaps he's talking about the kind of C-shaped. Is that what you're talking about, Rushir?
I'm talking at the top where the,
at the top.
Yeah, so he's talking about that there's a flashing which seems rather large for the flashing, and also this resolution of this is not so clear, but it seems like a horizontal element. So I wasn't sure if longboard is kind of taken up on the fascia surface as well, or what's happening there.
So basically, the materiality there is a hardy board with a paint finish that would simulate a wood product along there.
Okay.
Oh.
And this gray C shape that that Joe was talking about, the gray one, what is that surface material?
We can go back to the material board there. Maybe zoom in on the material.
It's like number 7, maybe.
Yeah, number 7.
I don't think we can zoom in here. We can't zoom while we're in the presentation.
No.
Just 1 second, we got it.
Yeah.
Number 7?
Yes.
Yeah, just bear with us for 1 second. We
Okay.
can't zoom while we're in the presentation, so we need to pull
Sure.
up a separate screen.
One of the original schemes, it was a metal panel, but I think that would change that now to a.
Number 7, Mr. Chair, is aluminum faced composite panel, architectural panel system, color charcoal.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, basically a composite aluminum panel system.
Okay, can we go back to 4.07 then?
Yeah.
So there's going to be some sort of panels and some sort of joints there, right? This seems to be a monolithic surface. So that's one. And then you see those little cornice corbelled elements on top of that, which we don't see anywhere else. Any logic to that being placed on these elements over here?
Yeah, it's just basically a stepped fascia system on that. It'd be a small little roof on top of those C elements. And that's basically a small parapet that creates a stepped fascia to give it some feature, kind of a cornice feature on top of those elements.
Okay, we don't see that element anywhere else, and seems like it was a contemporary kind of a feel, and therefore that cornice, I don't know. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the comments.
That's really just that what we were trying to do was sort of really create a strength in the horizontality of this facade. So that was the sort of how that was addressed in those C-shaped things, was to strengthen the horizontality, tie a little bit with the facades of those balconies and the facial lines.
Okay, now I think there's another rendering that we see which shows the northwest corner of the property. Could you show that, please? Yeah, this one. Thank you. So out here in the rendering, I'm quite happy that I commented that this corner, the northwest corner, because it's a rather dark corner with building shadow falling there, etc. And there's mature trees towards the southwest side as well. You had a lot of trees out here in the northwest, and which kind of prevented any sun from the patio areas over here. So if this is true, can you confirm this is like this, or it still has those trees, which on the landscape plan, I still see those?
Sorry, you're referring to the new trees down in this area?
In this area, the northwest corner, the green patch that you see inside of the fence and between the patio?
Yeah, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those are still there, right?
Yes, yeah, Rashir, I can confirm we do still have some canopy trees in that.
Okay, those were my questions.
Thank you, Rashir. Moving on to Phil. Questions, additional question. Phil, you're muted if you are speaking right now. Phil, are you with us? Phil's hand is up, but I can't hear him, so we'll move on unless.
I got it.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Phil.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Okay.
This is about energy efficiency. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and the architects can probably correct me, but energy step code will become mandatory, or is planned to become mandatory in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Step 3, perhaps. Greg would maybe, either Greg or Joe, but somebody. Anyway, the point is that the city is behind in implementing the energy step code, but our OCP does indicate as a policy for the city to move toward that. So I don't think it's unreasonable to ask and expect something. The answer from the architects at our last meeting about that was we will meet the requirements of the city. Well, the fact is the city is behind in making any actual requirements. So what may happen first is the building code may get changed, and the earliest I imagine for that might be 2023. That's the plan. So I think it's a reasonable thing to ask or expect that the architects, if not today, but at some point, could answer to council whether or not they think they might meet step 3 at least, if that's the expectation legally for 2023. So I'll just ask for if there's an update on that issue from the proponents.
Yeah, I think we've done step 3 and step 4 buildings in other jurisdictions where the requirements are there. We find generally with step 3, we're able to achieve that with relatively conventional wood frame construction practices. So we need an energy model done by our mechanical consultant, and then there's systems that go into place as part of that. But from a building construction standpoint, we'd be very close to meeting step code 3 because we are a wood frame building.
Okay, thank you. I'll just this is more of a comment rather than a question. And I think that information should be included in any package for a future package for the public or council. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. No, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Paul's hand is up again.
Yes, could I have a look at the plans, particularly P1 at I think it's the southwest end of P1. Could we look at that?
Yeah, I don't think that one was in the presentation, so I'll have to open up a different file here.
Parking plan 1, I guess it is, but.
It's that one. Yeah. Can you guys see the screen?
Yep.
Okay. P1, just passed it.
Okay.
Oh, that's P3, sorry.
That's P3.
Here we go.
There you go.
All right. I don't have can you see my arrow moving around here? No.
No, unfortunately
Anyway,
not.
down in the, by the elevator shaft. No, stay there. Yeah, the elevator shaft.
Sorry, we're bouncing around.
You got it.
Next to the
you got it.
elevator shaft, there looks like it's an anteroom with 2 double doors coming into it. Next to that, there's a vestibule-like affair with 3 doors going into it and 1 exit. Could you explain what that's all about, please?
Yeah, there it is.
Or do we care? I don't know.
Well, I'm curious.
Well, this,
now
I mean,
you
this is a required vestibule from the parkade to the residential use of the building. So that's the reason for this double door and room here. And this is an exit. This is obviously an exit vestibule, which exits multiple different portions of the building. So we have a residential component that exits through here. Here we have the secondary exit at this end. So this is basically a required vestibule as well to maintain a separation between a parkade here and the residential use here. So in essence, this is a vestibule, kind of the main entry from the parkade into the elevator lobby. And this is strictly more of an exit vestibule that's required for building code exiting purposes.
I thought it might be a holding area or something, but it's
Curious.
okay. It's probably unnecessary, but anyway, could we also look at? Am I okay, Mr. Chair, to talk to these plans now or not?
Sure. Well, I just have one question myself, and then we can move to comments
okay,
if you'd
go
like.
ahead. Sorry.
So my question was, and this came up with the previous one, and it kind of segues in or picks up a little bit on some of Rashir's questions about the 4th floor, and then also Phil's questions about energy. One of the concerns was allocating space for any rooftop units or mechanical equipment on those levels. So is it safe to say that hasn't been developed since then, or is there a different strategy?
No, the strategy maintains the same as what we had commented on in the last presentation. It hasn't been developed further. We haven't had specific conversations with the mechanical consultant, but the strategy is the same. Okay.
I think it might be time to get a better understanding of which step, if you're going to be using it, because it's going to have a dramatic effect potentially on that top floor, right? So if there are no more questions, although I do see a couple hands up, I don't know, are there new questions for Paul or Phil?
One. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my hand's still.
Go ahead.
Sure.
It is up.
The 3rd level, apartment 319, or was it A2? I don't know. There's something strange going on there as well. Yeah. Yeah, the apartment next to the, number 319, 318. Could you explain what's happening there, please? There's some, looks like balcony railings, and then I see the little balcony on the left coming out of 318.
Yeah.
Then there's a void. Yeah, I see your hand there. That's good. Now I can see it.
Yeah, sorry. I think there's a couple lines here that are showing up that shouldn't be, which would be these ones right here. The balcony would be, this is the balcony for 318, and the balcony for 319 would be this space here. These 2 lines should be shown there. Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, then while we're on this floor, and for that matter, all of the floors, the corridors are quite long, like they're almost 350 feet. That's a football field length. 1 straight run. I think you should use the opportunity where the elevator is to create a break in that long view line. It's a very long corridor, and it's even longer on floors lower down, of course. But where this elevator shaft widening is, and by the way, you're showing your elevator shafts in concrete. In a frame building like this, normally they're wood, but that's something you can take up with your engineer. But anyway, is there some way we could do something with that long corridor?
Yeah, this was coming from the very first presentation as well, guys. Finding a way to mitigate that. Have you looked at any other options?
Yeah, I mean, in other developments like this, that's when we get into the more detail in DD, but we can sort of break up that corridor at those entries just by framing those doors and with a small sort of pin light over those doors, and we could do some ceiling treatment as well, and some sort of valence treatment along there to break it up. So that's something we can develop further for sure. I agree with you. It is a bit of a long, sort of tedious corridor.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Phil, another question, and then perhaps we should move to comments, just being careful of the time.
Yeah, one of the, definitely it's a question. One of the issues that came up at our last meeting was about the use, which is part of under our terms of reference, is what are the intended function of the project. It's clearly a building, but there was some lack of clarity, at least to me, about how much was strata versus rentals. And I think because the public is here too, and the council's going to deal with it, is this clear yet about, is this all strata? Is this what % rental or what?
I'm not sure. It's 100% strata.
Okay, thank you. At least we're clear about that.
All right. Thank you. And I'm just going to ask Nicholas, Sharon, or Faye if there's anything. Otherwise, we will go to comments.
I think mine are more comments than questions.
Okay, wonderful. So since you're online, I do have Faye's hand up. Perhaps with a question, Faye, or a comment?
Just a comment, quick comment. Actually, I was going to ask the question, Phil. Just clarifying, this is no longer a mix. They're presenting is
full strata.
No full strata, no rental. Okay.
That is correct. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right, folks. If you don't mind, if we do have another item on the agenda, so if we can move to comments. Nicholas, you've been patient. Why don't you let us know your thoughts?
Sure. Well, unfortunately missed the last presentation, so I'm skipping last version. I'm going from version 1 to 3. So that being said, I guess first I gotta say, I mean, for myself at least, seeing where it's ended up today, it's nice to see how it's been refined and tightened, and that your team has done all the work to really, I guess you've heard everyone's comments and you've reacted and able to amend the application in that sense. Without actually seeing last ones, I guess I have two comments to sort of focus on. And one, again, maybe is going back to what Phil brought up earlier about, unfortunately, in the OCP, we have that word West Coast design, which is unfortunately, a sentence that could be a curse or a blessing, depending on how you want to see it, depending on your design. So in this sense, I mean, if we follow what the OCP or what the guidelines say to make West Coast design, only in reference to that, my only comment would be that I think the current material palette doesn't really reflect those guidelines. For example, like fake hardy panel with a fake wood look, it's not really, quote unquote, let's say West Coast design. So my only comment would be in terms of materiality is if West Coast design is really something that we need to adhere to, I think the interpretation of that wording of that sentence is to be as quote unquote natural materials as possible. I think most people probably, one of those kind of feature definitions will take out of that sentence. So one of my main comments would be, is there anything you can do in terms of materiality in the outside that's not hardy plank and it's not metal fascia, but we can actually use some natural materials? Excluding the crazy cost to do anything in wood today, that's a totally side discussion, but assuming that there wasn't crazy cost for plywood today, what can you do in wood with natural woods and natural stones to update the design? So that's one comment. The other comment I would actually just focus on is I'm actually really quite interested on the south, I'm trying to do my direction now, southwest corner of the building where it faces your neighbor. If you look at your elevation drawings, it appears that you have quite the large, let's say, retaining wall or concrete wall that faces your neighbor. And I was just on Google Street View as you were presenting. I noticed you have those small little red buildings right to your neighbor. And I guess the most direct comment I would say to put it black and white is, I feel bad for the guy looking out his window. He's going to see a nice big blank wall. And so my comment would be, is there anything that you can do in terms of your landscape design or architectural design, so when the guy looks out his window or when he's walking down in his yard, he doesn't see such a big blank wall? And I guess in reference, I'm trying to see what page that is on here, just as a reference. So I'm just trying to find it here. Where did you go? Sorry, come on, computer. So specifically looking at page ADP 3.03 on the left-hand side, the south elevation. And page ADP 3.02, so the bottom right-hand corner. So if you look at the scale of your car you got there, that whole sort of triangular section at the bottom southwest corner.
Yeah. Okay, no, thanks for that. We'll take a look at that.
Yeah. Those I look to. Other than that, I mean, going back to the bigger picture, I think, I think I commend the team to, bring it down to the scale it is today. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Moving down the line, I've got Phil for comments, please. You're muted again, Phil. You're muted.
Are you okay? Lots of this has gone around a number of times. I will say that I think that the reducing the height has addressed a number of my concerns from the last time. I would be supportive of this. I mean, they've done, the architects have done a lot. There's more work to be done. But some of that is beyond me and beyond, I think, I'm concerned a little bit about this really small units. I mean, we talked about, I don't take a position on rental versus strata. That's not an issue for me. I think that's an issue for the developer and council. But looking at there are a lot of units that are studios that are in the 300 some square feet, including deck, I believe. And I would be concerned about the small size for strata units. But again, that's an issue of the market and so on. So I don't get involved so much about that. It's just, I'll say it's a heads up concern. So my comment basically is that if this goes forward, which I would support, that they not only address some of the issues that have been raised, but including the following: energy step, West Coast design, which Nicholas also raised. I will add the issue of trees. It's really a critical issue for the neighborhood to make sure that in 20 years or 10 years, those trees are viable, the existing ones. And I will say that one thing that I didn't mention before, oh, sorry, and one other thing is the stories. We talked last time about 4 or 5 or 6 stories, and then the question came up, are we talking about, what's the definition of a story? Questions about heights, what's an average story, the height, and so on. And the one thing that I would suggest and encourage, whether it's the city and or the developer, when talking about this building, they talk about a 4-story building. The reality is that depending upon where you look, it's 4 stories or 5 stories or 6, including looking from Thrift, although it's stepped back. So my understanding is it's 4 stories at the base of the average natural grade. So that's a legal issue, but let's talk about, which is fine. I'm happy with that. But I think we need to be much clearer to council and the public when making a statement that it's a 4-story building. That's if I'm not mistaken, that's based on the height from the average natural grade. And my last thing that I never raised before, but just a comment, which is about privacy on the top deck. the privacy between the units 407, 408, and 409. It wasn't a question. It's a question. I didn't have a question about it, but it's a comment that I wonder to what degree people that are using the common space will interfere with, or how to protect the units, people in units 407, 408, and particularly 409, their privacy from people in the common space. And I think the common space is critical, the social gathering space. So those are my comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. I'm going to move to Paul now, please.
Yeah, could we have a look at the rendering, the first page, please, with that shows the Beverly as well? Yeah, now that rendering, surely that's an exaggeration on the Beverly. It looks like an enormous, great thing there. And I think that's misleading, frankly. And I agree with the comments of Nicholas and Phil. Now, I would also like to say that these projects are hard to pencil depending on the economics involved and everything else, but the units are minimal. These are minimal standards of plans. They're small, they're very tight. We made the comment before about the guidelines, British Columbia Housing Guidelines. I think that that this really doesn't stack up with the rest of the high quality developments that we have in White Rock. And although this is a frame building, it still could match the quality that we expect in better development projects. And I know that there are constraints as to the cost of land and whether you can sell these things at a reasonable price, but that's all economics, and we architects aren't, I don't think, great at that kind of thing. But I just feel that the designing to the minimum is not what you want to do. You've always got to be better than the minimum. And so therefore, I'm not really in favor of this project at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'll move to Ruchir, please. Ruchir.
Okay. Yeah, there is a significant evolution that this project has had, not just from the first, but from the last iteration as well, no question. But I guess overall issues, especially both in architectural and landscape, a majority of them seem to have been unresolved, in my opinion. There are three major things that stand out in landscape, which are rather minor and could have been fixed very easily, but haven't been given enough attention or importance, or I don't know what. As I said in my questions, there doesn't seem to be the area at the top, amenity area, needs to be more worked out in terms of being workable and usable, serviceable. There's so much of programming being shown there with no space to lock them up, bench, a little water spout, stuff like that. Small little details haven't been shown. I'm not a big proponent, a big supporter of those trees in the northwest corner, which totally seem to kind of shadow those patios to the northwest. I also talked about how Skimmia japonica, I'm just giving an example of one plant species, is around all the four sides of a couple levels that we see here. There would have been more variety shown, more planting palette diversified, and a lot of stuff could have been done. I talked about, as Nicholas pointed out, showing hardy colored in wood is not a great idea. There's small little elements in architecture that kind of seem to bother me. Those little cornices which show in the rendering don't show in the elevations, I think take away. I don't think they have a place on that kind of a design. there's a lack of clarity if there's those metal panels, if they're metal panels, and what size, whether they're glossy, there's junction, there are reveals there, etc. I don't know what's going to happen. So if there are renderings prepared, they should have that level of detail. If they are not very evident in elevation, then I guess in architectural renderings, they kind of show what is intended to be. But apart from those details, I don't mind a project like this. I think if just there are definitely, there is a niche for smaller units as well in the marketplace. And I would have liked the answer a bit better, that instead of being a completely strata, if it was partially rental, I would have welcomed that kind of an approach as well. But by and large, I'm not against this project, but there are so many details, both architectural and landscape, that seem to be worked upon further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchir. Next panelist I'm going to is Sharon.
Hi.
Hi.
Just a few comments. I want to kind of address the strata versus rental thing, just so that everyone is aware. All new stratas, when the developer puts their disclosure into City Hall, they're all rentable. So it's not like this is a no rental building. There will be no rental restrictions unless they choose. What we're seeing in new buildings now is it's usually a rental based on no short-term rentals. But for the most part, all new buildings are rentable. So it's not like no one can rent there and that people couldn't buy and have rental. I guess the switch from the change of number of suites was the amount that needed to be rentable was to be a concession to add more suites. So it was that was given up based on, so just to clarify the strata thing. My other comment, West Coast Design is came forward to the OCP many years ago, and it was kind of described as the Whistler thing. Which is fine, which is a little bit dated too, but understandably, understanding we're on the West Coast, we like natural. But economics moving forward, plus with maintenance for buildings, sometimes you have to make it look like West Coast Design, and it's not natural necessarily. So there is a fine line, and it's also beauty is in the eye of the beholder as to who decides what West Coast means. One person has a picture of it, an architect has another picture of it, it means something different to everyone. So it's kind of that's a tough one. And it is vague at best because it's not specific. It gives examples. So that's a tough one. Definitely. That's just a comment of how hard it is to maintain that with many, many different aspects to it, as economics moving forward being one of them, and also trying to be affordable. So if we built this with all West Coast, truly cedar, everything else, no one, maybe no one can afford to buy it. The maintenance moving ahead, no one can afford the strata fees. So there's a bunch of different aspects to that we also have to weigh and agree on, that it's not straightforward that way. My other comment, the energy step codes that are being introduced, which are wonderful for the world in general. In the future, at certain aspects of it adds a huge cost to the buildings as well. So the affordability level. So there was also certain levels of that where there does have to be caution. If we were full on level 5 energy, it's going to add so much money to the construction, which is already out of control. So we do have to weigh certain aspects of that and how to do it in a cost-effective way. So yes, there is definitely standards in the building code. If we follow them to the nth degree, no one will be able to afford to buy them. We have to be careful. Just those are my comments. And I'm in favor, I can't vote, but I'm in favor of this building. We need more people to be moving here and more places for them to live and to support our businesses in our communities. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
And last on our list here, last but not least, Faye, any comments for the proponents?
I just want to comment that I think the revisions that were made from the last meeting, the decreasing it to 4 stories, I like that better than the 5-story. I think that making it all strata is a good way to go. I think it's less confusing rather than having, a blend of rental, which I know Sharon has pointed out, but there's a difference between renting from the developer and renting from someone that actually owns the condo. So I think it's also a nice addition to the neighborhood. I understand Paul's concerns in terms of, the level in the White Rock community. And, on Thrift alone, you have Phantom, which is 10 stories. And then the next is Royce, which has been a beautiful development and very community based, as well as the Beverly. So it kind of complements. It's not quite at the same level, though. I agree with you, Paul. But there's all kinds of different considerations. And one, it may turn out that it's more affordable for people to purchase and get in, living in the community, as opposed to renting. So I do support it. I support the development.
Okay, thank you, Faye. And I'll just now add my comments. I'm a bit conflicted here, for sure, just to be clear. I feel almost that going to the 4 stories and magically pulling out a story and expecting the building to maintain proportions from an architectural perspective and still make it a bit perhaps simplistic. It seemed more expedient than studied to me. But it is what it is. One thing that's got me really, I really don't quite know what to make of it. It's the top floor is very peculiar. You go through a corridor and the doors to your left go out to private outdoor spaces. The doors to the right go to units. There's a tremendous lost opportunity for south and westerly views from that top floor that could have been solved by simply shifting the corridor to the east side instead, so that all those units that have private spaces actually open up to their own private spaces. And it would also decrease potentially some of the mass. If it were, say, for example, an outdoor corridor, it could reduce some of the mass on the east side. So just a simple move, which would address all of the strangeness that I think is occurring up there. That strangeness also occurs, as Nicholas has pointed out, on the southwest, where for the first 2 floors that are exposed, it looks like the back of a building because it's all wall, which isn't a very friendly neighbor to the westerly neighbors. So kind of a bit strange, a combination of expedience in simply taking a floor out and shaking the mix a little bit, but also not fully resolving things that, if just given a little bit more time, could end up being really nice suites, which is a segue into the question about the suites. And I know that we've had a lot of discussion about this. I still don't personally feel that they've been developed as well as they could be. I'm not, the size is the size, the market will dictate that. But just because you're buying a smaller suite, and some of these we're looking at 1 bedrooms whose only window is through the walk-in closet, and the walk-in closets are only 4 feet wide. And if you're hanging something in those closets, you've got a 2-foot strip that's somehow supposed to provide natural light to those bedrooms. And to me, from an architectural perspective and a humanist perspective, that's not quite enough. I think that they can do better than that. And I hope that whatever iteration or whatever form this development actually takes in the future, that they start to take into account not how many units are viable, but how many units are viable and can be enjoyed with dignity by the people living in them. Because that's a real problem for me. And I see a lot of it here, that I see a lot of expedience. So those are my comments. Usually after comments, we have an opportunity for the proponents to respond generally to the comments. Obviously, there were a lot of them. I do see Peter, who was representing Weststone at our last meeting, has arrived. I don't know if he has been talking to his architectural group, but his hand has been up for a while. So if it's okay with the panel, I'm just going to invite Peter to speak, perhaps as a representative of the proponent, and then open the floor to Keystone if they have any additional comments to our comments. So if that's okay with the panel, Peter.
Well, thank
you
you,
can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate it. And we have been listening to all the comments for literally many, many months from the first presentation to now. And as you've clearly identified in a couple of the comments, we have listened to the residents of the neighboring developments, the Beverly, the townhouses. We've looked at all of that. One of the big things with the trees, we've kept the trees for two reasons. One, because of maintaining the environmental impact of any development and keeping as many mature trees as you possibly can in developments. And also respecting the people in the Beverly, because if you were to go to the Beverly, and I have, and you look at this site with this building now and the size of it, we will respect their ability to have their views that they currently have protected. And that was an important, I think, element for the developer going through this. The issues of step code, as the architects have said, the developer will do everything they can to get the highest step code rating possible with a wood structure building. And there are opportunities, as was indicated, with wood frame that we can get close to step code 3. We're going to continue to do the refinements. We've heard the comments from the committee again. In order to do those and in order to take it forward, because as you all know, as it goes to council, the first and second reading, then there'll be a public hearing. There will be more opportunity for public comment, and we welcome that. But we've been doing a lot of outreach into the community, and the balance, I think, has been shared by a couple of the members, is the economics of making something financially viable, to make it affordable, and to be something that the community can be proud of. And we believe we've tried to get there. There are some good comments that have been made about other refinements. And if indeed storage can be accommodated on the roof for some of the furniture that might be up there, but there are other ways to do that that doesn't infringe on the size of the units. I will say this too, just for the committee's edification. A lot of work has gone into market analysis by the developer, and there is a place for different size units. We want a mix of residents in this building. We believe that it will appeal to certain seniors. We believe it'll appeal to young people, and we believe it'll appeal to singles. And singles today look for a different product than their parents did when they were looking for a place to live. So all of that has been taken into consideration to make this project not only appropriate for the community, not only something the community can be proud of, but also something that's affordable for that mix of potential people who will buy in and call it their home for whatever period of time they will live there. I can assure you all the comments have been heard by the architects and ourselves. I do agree with Sharon. The issue of West Coast look, if you go throughout the West Coast and you look at buildings, you look at the cost of construction, things can be made to look very West Coast, but it wouldn't be a cedar tree that's been cut down to put exterior finishes on a building. And so our commitment as a developer is we're going to make this building fit into the community, something the community can be proud of. And we know there's a few more steps to go with council and with public hearing, and we're committed to doing that and refining even prior to that we go there to some of the comments that have been made again today. So I appreciate the committee, appreciate how long it's taken us to get to this point, and hopefully we can move forward here to council and to public hearing and further community input.
Thank you, Peter, for your words. So with that, back to the panel, remembering that our mandate is not to pass it as such. Our mandate is really to review it on its merits from an architectural, landscape architectural, et cetera, perspective. And really the question is not so much does it go ahead, it's do we want to see it again for these refinements? So I would open the floor to panelists to put forward a motion. Is anyone willing
Joe?
to put forward a motion at this time? Yes?
Yeah.
Phil, yes?
Can I speak for a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
It might lead to a motion, but I was the first one in your list to comment, and then I heard what everybody else said, and I'm very impressed by the input from others. So I would like to build on that for a minute. I said I was in support of it, and I am in support, but I take the comments that the other panel members said very seriously. So I think there's a lot more that could be done. I think it really, but the question is, what can the ADP do? What, we can have it keep coming back here for refinements. My issue when I said I support it was simply that it go to the next stage, that we've made our comments, and we hope that the planners and council will then do their job to see what those comments are. So my hope is that we will, through the minutes, come up with a list of particular issues to continue to be addressed. So I just want to say I'm impressed by the input and the comments, and I have a question for Paul, if that's okay. Paul said he wasn't in support, but it was ambiguous to me of whether that was because of the design or the size of the units or both. When I say the design, the exterior design or the size of the units. Is that a fair question, Paul?
Oh,
well, no, there's an accumulation of items, including what the chair had to say as well. And it just all in putting it all together, this project it doesn't appear to me to come up to any standard that I would like to accept. That's about it.
Okay, thank you. Then I think that what really leads to me is I would like to see it better. And the question is, what more is it good enough to go forward to the next stage? That's sort of where I am right now, because I like the comments. Yeah. So I'm willing to move that this is the for discussion. What's the terms of reference allow us, unless others want to, I'll just put this out there as a motion. Obviously,
please, yeah, go ahead. We'll have a discussion after.
Moving, which is a recommendation to support the project to council, subject to considerations, specifics to be listed by the panel, made to the satisfaction of staff. That's sort of where I am right now.
Do I have a seconder for that motion so we can discuss and vote? Second, not necessarily supporting, just a second.
Yeah, I think Nicholas seconded it already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll second. I mean, at a high level, like you said, I'll open it for discussions. Let's say, so I'll second it to go to discussion.
So, can I have if we are discussing it, can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
It's exactly where we stood after the last presentation, that there were things that needed to be addressed. Still, there are a lot of things to be addressed. The point that the chair made about bedrooms not getting ventilation is a point I brought last time, and that's still not been addressed. The bedrooms kind of sit back through a walk-in closet. So those are the things. There are a number of other things that I pointed out that still need to be addressed further. Yes, there has been some promise shown, but I guess there's still a lot of things that will prevent us from going to a motion of support. So it has, I guess, still a number of conditions that need to be fulfilled. So I think we are exactly at the same place. Last time we pointed this out, and I asked that question of Greg, that does this mean that it comes back? If the staff wants to come back, that's fine. If the staff feels confident, they can resolve it, they can take it forward. But I guess those conditions and caveats come with with the acceptance or support.
Yeah, through you, Ms.
Sorry, Phil, 1 second. Go ahead, Greg, just responding to Rushir.
Yeah, so the motion that I have from Phil is that the panel supports the project proceeding to council subject to the conditions, or sorry, subject to the satisfaction of the comments as made by the panel during the meeting to the satisfaction of staff. So that's how I've drafted the motion. And so what we would do is I would circulate the draft meeting minutes to the panel, so you would have the opportunity to make sure I've captured your comments correctly. We'll make revisions, and then I would work with the applicant to resolve those comments and questions to where we felt that the public interest, largely the way the project aligns with the DP, development permit area guidelines, and some of the other more substantive things that I can sort of work with the architect and landscape architect to resolve have been resolved. But to answer your question, Rashir, yes, if I'm at an impasse, or if I feel that, and my colleagues feel the same, that we're just not comfortable as staff taking the project forward to the Land Use and Planning Committee without further consultation with the panel, then I would look to do that. But based on the feedback that you've offered today, I'm currently feeling that I can work with the architect and the landscape architect to resolve matters sufficient to be able to bring it forward to the Land Use and Planning Committee with a bylaw for consideration of first and second reading.
Thank you, Greg. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, just some clarification based on what Rashir said. That our last vote, at the last meeting, which I did not support, was it not that it was the next level, which would just go forward? Am I correct? That it didn't have to come back to us, but it's rather because of the significant change, it did come back to us. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is there just a side question here? I know it happens in other jurisdictions. Can this project come back to ADP after first and second reading again?
I think we could potentially do that. It's not.
I just don't know. Maybe this is going too far, but if we want to, you know, maybe there was not, maybe that's the correct word, check up to see if the changes really did happen, kind of thing.
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I think the panel members would have the opportunity to see the revised drawing package that would accompany the report to the Land Use and Planning Committee, enough to know that the comments have or have not been addressed. So as any member of the public would. And I guess if you felt as though something really obvious to you or really pertinent to the comments that you've made today are not reflected in, say, the detailed drawing package that we would attach with the report to the Land Use and Planning Committee, if there were still glaring things missing, then I think that's a conversation we could have. I'm sort of thinking on the fly here. I don't believe.
Yeah, sorry, I just put it out there. I don't know whether that was actually a common thing to do. I just asked generally, because I know some other jurisdictions have done that in the past.
So yeah, so it's a bit of a difficult one. So are we ready to call a vote on that motion then? Is everybody clear on what's happening? Go ahead.
I put this, I made the motion, it's been seconded, and I think we should vote on it.
Yeah.
I will just put out that I think that if it's defeated, then we should assume that the defeat, which I'm not going to fight for it, is that it would that it would come back to us. It's the next level that it does come back to us. That's my reading of what.
It would be subject to the next motion. If yours fails, another motion would have to be made, right? Or acceptance, rejection, come back, whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, voting members, are we ready to call the vote on the motion on the table? Yeah. So we'll start with those in favor of the motion. And then those opposed to the motion. So are we voting by hand or by messaging?
I think we can verbalize it.
Okay, so for the record, I'll start 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5. We'll start with Nicholas. For or against?
I will support, yes.
Okay, and Paul, for or against?
Against?
Rushir, for or against?
4.
And Phil, for or against?
I'll be for.
And I will be against. So that is 3 of the voting to 2. So
Faye.
motion has passed.
Did you ask Faye?
Oh, my goodness. Faye, sorry, you are going to either
Yeah.
create a tie or
I'm sitting on the fence now. That's a tough situation to be in.
kind of
Oh my
is.
gosh.
So sorry.
Joe, sorry, Joe, I'm going to change my vote.
Oh,
I'm going to make it easy. I think that we need to be supportive. There's enough concern here by a few of you that, and I don't think it's an awful lot to ask for the developer. They got to make the changes anyway. It's a question of whether they come to us. So I'm going to vote against the motion.
Okay.
okay.
And Faye?
They may make it easier for Faye or not. I don't know.
Well, that does make it easier. I'm gonna vote against.
Okay. So it's 4. I believe the final tally was 2 for and 4 against. So so the motion has not passed, and so we need a new motion. And Phil, you might as well make it.
For the project pending the resolution of issues to be listed by the panel, following which the application would be brought back to the panel, and the applicant would be expected to speak to how the changes were made to address the issues.
Thank you. A second by Nicholas, and we'll call the vote on this one again, starting with Nicholas.
I'll support that motion. Yes.
Thank you. And Paul?
I'd like to hear the motion again. I'm not quite sure I understand what he's trying to get at there.
Oh, it's one of our standard choices, but basically it's the project would defer the project pending the resolution of issues, which would be listed just like we would do otherwise in the minutes, following which the application would be brought back to the panel. And the applicant would be expected to speak to how the changes were made to address the issue. So it's basically coming back like they did today, even though we didn't require them to come back.
It's sort of like flogging a dead horse, but
A little bit.
Well, yeah.
So 4 against, Paul?
I'm against.
Against coming back. Okay. And then Rushir, 4 or against?
So I'm a little unclear. The motion now is to bring it back, right?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I'm for.
Okay. And Paul is, and then Faye?
I'm for.
Okay. And Phil?
Or
And I am 4 as well. So the final tally is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor of the motion and 1 against in the motion. And so the motion has been carried. Thank you. All right. Westone and Keystone and Bandersam, thank you for your presentation. Unfortunately, heard the motion and the requirements, so I thank you and hope to see a continued refined project be represented to the advisory design panel on your timetable. Thank you very much. And so we have about 90 minutes left scheduled for this meeting, and we have one other item to go over. Is the panel okay to keep going, or would you like to take a 5-minute break and reconvene? Any preference? Sorry, keep going?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda, excuse me, is an application at 15495 Oxenham Avenue. So I'll turn it over to Greg to provide some background information on this, also revised submission, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, please bear with me a minute. I'm just taking minutes as we go. Okay, so this application is also a returning to the panel. It's a project at 15495 Oxenham Avenue. It's a proposed duplex. So this is the subject property you can see on the screen here. It's in the context of lower profile single family detached homes, sort of south of the hospital in the city. Just by way of background, it's an application for zoning amendment to enable the duplex development, and there's a major development permit that is the subject of your review here today. The application was originally presented to the panel back in July of last year, and I've listed here the comments that were made by the panel at that time. So there were concerns about lack of detail, example, railing along the driveway, need for colors to draw warmth and stone accents, potential use of cedar beams. Similar to the adjacent home, you'll see those in the renderings. Conflicts between the rendering and drawings. So the panel may recall that there were some structural components that were kind of sunken into other components. So the renderings were off. Some of the graphics were off. There was a desire to look for break-in materials in line with structural elements. I think that was the comment made by the chair. Avoid mirrored design with the duplex, and use landscaping to soften the interaction of the building with the street. Differentiate the garage doors. I think the specific reference there was potentially having a single car garage next to a double. And then focus on the rear elevation. It shouldn't be lost in the design, that it would just be a homogeneous, somewhat blank wall. So with that, I will let the applicant speak to those points. But as it relates to the OCP, lands of designated mature neighborhood, you can kind of see that reflected in the mapping here. So the white represents mature neighborhood, where the OCP, the policy framework, looks at low profile forms of housing. So singles, duplexes, triplexes. There's also a policy that limits the number of duplexes along a block to 20% of one side of the street. So we, as part of the planning due diligence, we look for that. There's not an issue with the number of duplexes in this context. Mature neighborhood infill DPA guidelines look at ensuring compatibility, avoiding mirror imaging in the design as it relates to duplexes, creating visual interest in the design, architectural details that break up the massing and form of the building, creates identity, using a variety of cladding colors, ensuring garages do not dominate the front of face of the home, using light colored reflective paving materials, landscaped areas. Landscaping should be used in areas that are not covered by buildings and structures and other impermeable surfaces like driveways. Selecting trees that maximize passive solar gain and natural cooling and low impact development as it relates to stormwater controls. The process was, we had a public information meeting back in January of 2019. This file was reviewed by the panel, and the dates you can see there. And similar process for moving this forward to present to Land Use and Planning Committee a bylaw to help change the zoning, or to essentially implement the changes to the zoning, and then a public hearing followed by subsequent readings. So with that, through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant is still in the room here, so we could turn it over to him to present the file.
Thank you. And so the applicant is Prab Katkar.
Hi,
Prab.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good, thank you. So we're excited to hear about some of your adjustments to the proposal. So please.
Okay, so I don't know if Greg can bring up the presentation or if I should share my screen.
Prab, if you have it there and you can share it, then that would be good. So I'm not clicking
Okay.
the slides for you. I'll let you go at your own pace.
No, perfect, that works. 1 second. Sorry guys, just 1 second.
That's okay.
Prab, if it's easier, I can share it for you.
I think it's sharing now. I don't know if it's the same.
We don't see it yet. I don't see it.
Prab, I'll just share it so it's easier. Okay. In the interest of time here. So
thank you.
Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay.
So the panel should be able to see that now.
Got it.
Right. So basically, if you could skip to the next slide. So we're just rezoning from RS1 to RT1, I believe, two attached homes. There's a duplex, and then this change city had listed a bunch of changes. We had summarized in a letter that we had sent the changes that were made. If you could go to the next slide. The next one. So this is the front elevation. So some of the changes that were made is that the garage doors were changed to show that differentiate the two duplexes. The basement floor facade was changed to cultured stone to give it a West Coast modern look. The main floor wall cladding of east unit is changed to hardy panel board to make it consistent with the West Coast contemporary look. The main floor west unit is changed to longboard to make it more consistent. The double height porch roof of the west unit has been lowered down to 1 story, keeping in mind the human scale element, because you guys had referred to, I believe, last time that it was too high. And the upper floor wall cladding of the east unit was changed to hardy panel board and longboard to make it more consistent as well. And then just like that was the basic stuff for the front elevation. And the right elevation, the sheeter single sidings had been removed from the right elevation to give it a more consistent look. And the same thing with the left side. And then if we go to the guardrails were added as requested. I believe that if you go to the rear elevation of the house, I think it should have been in there. So if I can, would you be able to pull up the architectural plans, Greg, if that's possible? If it's not, then it's okay.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, that's perfect. So on the upper floor, all 3 windows are changed to box out window seats, and the cladding is changed to longboard. Before it was a very plain back, and there was no like difference in depth and everything. It was kind of just flat, and so now this gives it a break for the different types of cladding elements. So that's pretty much the back, and then the complete landscape design was changed as well to be more detailed. I believe Rashir had said that he wanted a more in-depth of like what kind of landscape different plants we were using and like the names of them. So I think the landscape architect had gone more in depth with that. And then that was pretty much all of the changes that were requested from what I recall.
Okay. Thank you, Prab. More straightforward project panel. Are there any questions on the documents that have been presented today, starting with Phil, please? And yeah, you're muted.
Thank you. I guess it's because of alphabetical order. Is that the reason?
No, I've got the list is on my sidebar there, and you're on the top of it. So
okay. Thank you very much. These are questions. The render this photograph here of the house. This is about the trees. I'm glad to see some of the large trees in the back are being retained. It's a beautiful area, and I'm glad that you're retaining about half of those large trees. The front also, the landscape design indicates that a few large trees in the front are being retained, but I don't see them in the rendering. So could you clarify that? Or am I mistaken?
No, you're not mistaken, Phil. They're shown on the plan. Perhaps you have a response?
I think that was just a genuine mistake from the landscape architect.
So are they there or not?
The,
Because if they're listed
the
as
trees are currently there. They're gonna stay there. I believe they're not, according to the tree arborist report, I don't think they're meant to be removed. There's a couple in the back that are supposed to be removed.
No, wait, let's go. I'm confused now. A clear question, are the two in the front, on the right side in the front, to be retained?
I believe so.
On the property.
Greg, would you kindly put up the tree management plan in the arborist report, please? I saw the Woodbridge arborist report there. I'll drill right down to it. Thank you. There's your answer. Is this the... And is there a second page?
Right there. No, that one you just...
Okay, yep.
There. The two in the front there said,
right.
I thought they were to be, maybe it's another page, being retained on the right side.
Yeah, they're just shown at a really light line weight, it looks like to me.
Yeah, but if you go back to it's in the landscape plan. I have it on my other screen. That's to be. It's in the landscape plan.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, I don't know if you can see that, Phil, but I think this is what you're referring to.
That's
so that. Yeah. So, and as the chair mentioned, those trees are reflected as in a sort of lighter shade within the other side here that shows the relationship between the proposed plantings with the trees to be retained.
Okay, so those are being retained. So let's go back to the rendering.
Rendering's not accurate.
Which does not show any trees there. I just want absolute clarity on this. That doesn't mean, so it could be just the rendering of that picture that we've seen is just an old picture.
I believe it's just a mistake on the rendering. I believe, from what I remember, the trees are to be retained.
Okay, we go on the assumption that they're retained. And my next question relates to that. One of the issues is about the driveway. It looks to me from the new design that the driveway, to provide more landscape in the front and to retain those trees and buffer this is one of the comments, is about buffering the look of the house by retaining those trees and more landscaping in the front. Am I correct that the driveway has been reduced in area?
So to the applicant, Rob?
To the applicant.
I believe that the driveway was reduced from what it was previously.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is about the sides of the house. So it wasn't clear to me from the drawings that the space between the house and what is going into the space between the house and the property line on the sides? Is it gravel? Is it grass? Or is there a fence? It says cedar.
It's going to be a 6 foot.
It's a river rock. It's a river rock.
Oh.
On landscape fabric, geotextile.
On the site plan, it's showing concrete sidewalks, both sides. So, Prab, do you know which one it's supposed to be?
It's going to be the one that's on the landscape plan.
So
it's going to be River Rock.
That's where my confusion came. Let's go to landscape.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's it. That's what.
No, if I may, Joe, Joe,
Yeah.
even on the site plan, on the architectural plans, it does show concrete, but there's a gap between the property line and the
that gap.
concrete. So
Okay,
I
got
think it is accurate. I think it's accurate.
Okay. Yeah, no, I see that now, Richard.
Okay.
So what between any of you, what's the answer?
Oh, it's a
River rock.
combination. Concrete starts as concrete as a sidewalk for it looks like 3 feet and then changes to river rock.
I would
Prab,
go with the
Prab,
landscape plan because
Yeah, sure.
it's just it's way more up to, because I hadn't attached a landscape architect to this project until our last meeting.
Mhm.
And then so he went based off the comments, so I would go based on, like, his plan would be the more accurate.
Okay.
You mean a landscape designer, right?
Yeah, the landscape designer, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Now, one more question. Is that I see.
This is my last one. I'll
Sorry.
talk that up. So it's concrete by the house, then 1 to 2 inch river rock, and then a cedar fence all around.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rashir, go ahead.
Yeah, just one question. I asked the question because it was in continuation with what we're discussing.
Yes.
There's a little window well shown there in the middle of the concrete path. Just can't understand that. Both on the site plan and on the landscape, you see the edge of the ties or whatever it is. So is there supposed to be a grill on top of that, which hasn't been shown, or what is it? A little bit of, if you can clarify that.
Where is that again? Sorry.
West side, middle of the building. West side, middle of the building. There's a window well in the concrete pathway. There it is.
Okay, okay. So yeah, that would be,
A metal grill over it.
yeah, that would have a metal grill over it, yeah.
Yeah, so that should be typically shown both instead of a concrete hatch. That's
Okay.
all. Okay. It
Okay,
threw us off a little bit. That's all.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'll get that addressed.
Any other questions from the group?
Have you done any change to the driveway slope here, Prab?
I believe that from what it was last time, it was changed when we changed the size of the driveway and the slope.
Okay, so it's much more gradual now compared to
Yeah,
last
it's
time?
more gradual because last time there was a comment about it being really steep. Now it's more gradual into the.
Okay, and
Yeah, so-
one more thing I've noticed, if you see the site plan, can you just scroll this up a little bit, Joe, or whosoever is controlling it? Thank you.
I don't know who.
And if you could zoom in on the driveway a little bit. Thank you. A little more. Yeah, thank you. Now, we really appreciate and welcome that you've kind of made the slope more gradual. It was more like 16 or 17% last time, if I remember.
Yeah.
And this is more like 12%. So we welcome that change. However, it seems to be a little tight here at the entrance. It shouldn't be a problem if one car is going, the other one is coming out. That should be fine. But then we see the beginning of staircases, their landings, their corners jutting out, which is in itself a little bit of a constriction in a rather tight space. So is there a way, did you think about it, or is there a way you can kind of shove it in to the sides and make the driveway clearer?
It's something I can definitely discuss with the landscape designer and see
Okay.
How they can maybe shift the walls or
Sure.
move it back or forth, or see how they can adjust it so it doesn't come in the way of the actual garage.
Yeah, you don't want the cars to be hitting the corners there, right?
Yeah. It's something
both from
definitely that we can definitely get addressed. And
I think, Prab, while you're doing that, you might want to double check your grades because you're showing top of wall, bottom of wall, adjacent to the garage entrances with approximately 2 foot differential. Yet you're showing 7, 8 risers halfway down the driveway. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If it's only a couple of feet at the lowest point, why do we have so many stairs? And that might address the problem, right?
Okay.
I don't think it's accurate the way I'm looking at it.
Okay, I'll get that. I'll get that all.
You follow what I mean, right?
Yeah, you're saying on one side.
Well, you have TOW, BOW, which I assume is top of wall, bottom of wall, retaining walls on either side of the garage, the driveway.
Yeah.
And it's 99 and change and 97 and change. So that's a 2-foot differential,
Yeah.
right? That's 24 inches is only 3 or 4 steps.
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we're only halfway down the driveway and we're showing 8 steps. So that's
Yeah.
why it's a bit.
No worries. I can get that definitely checked out.
Any other questions?
I just have a quick question, just
Sure.
want to make sure, I just want to make sure that White Rock doesn't require, I guess, a sidewalk from the sidewalk to the house then, that you're allowed to go down the driveway to go back up for it to get into your house.
Yeah, that's correct. We don't require it.
Okay, just wanted to triple check that. Okay, thanks.
I just have a comment on the elevation. Could I see the front elevation, please? Good, thanks. I wasn't at the original, when this came to the panel originally. One of the things that bothers me is the scale of this building relative to its neighbors. And I think that could be helped a great deal if you were to, first of all, line up your eaves, the eave above each one. There's one with a balcony in it with an eave about a foot below, and then there's the one next to it higher. If all the eaves line up, it looks a lot more controlled and sophisticated. In addition to that, I would like to see you extend the roof overhang from 2 feet to 3 feet, which would tend to lower the soffit over the balcony somewhat. I think that the height, relative height from the deck to the soffit is a little exaggerated and is not normal in the neighbors, the buildings around you. So, and also it just has a better feel in my view. And that's the only comment I have to make about that. Thank you. Oh, and indeed, in addition to that, why not make both garage doors the same?
That's what we originally had, Paul. But
sorry?
They wanted it differentiated.
Why?
Originally. The proposal was different before, Paul, where we were trying to at least find a way to create identity for either side, and this was their response. Now, obviously, this is the first we've seen of it as well. So it is what it is. Yeah. Well, either way, it's like, if having not seen it, it's now something new to us, and this is their response. And so whether or not it cuts the mustard, just because we say something, doesn't mean you have to do it if it doesn't make sense when you've developed the design, right?
That's up, right.
So, yeah. So we'll continue on with comments. Those are well heard. Shall we move to Nicholas?
Well, I guess I'll start off. I mean, I remember this application now. It was maybe from last summer or early fall, I guess. So it's come a long way since then. When I remember looking back at the other from previous submissions, I remember one of the biggest comments was about the roof lines, and if I recall, I think maybe from the first submission also about whether the applicant actually engaged an engineer yet to see whether the roof lines would actually even work, from my recollection. So I guess that's maybe a question more than a comment, that whether if you've actually passed the design through an engineer yet to make sure that like the roof lines and what you're proposing will really work.
Yeah, I think that that stems from the large scaled columns seemingly just going up into very thin portions of roof. From just a structural logic, it doesn't seem to be normal.
So I took this plan just recently, maybe like two month and a half ago, to West Coast Trust, and they were our engineers, and they said they have no issue with the project and the structural aspect of it, and the trusses and the roof lines and everything seemed pretty good with them.
So the truss company would definitely give you comments about their truss layout and how complicated their fabrication and all that stuff is. But a structural engineer would actually look at the entire structure. For example, the large columns that we see towards the left side, we see that at the bottom of the garage, the line to the right of the garage does not align with the heavy column up top. So stuff like that, whether
they're also structural engineers though, sir. So they had taken a look at it from both aspects.
I guess maybe it's more kind of half question, half comment kind of thing. It was just we want to make sure because it was a big, I don't know big, but it was a major item that was brought up in the first application that that hopefully obviously we don't want to disapprove this and then we come back and that you had to and then by the time we do a drive-by in a year or two from now that the roof line changed again because the engineer said you couldn't do this design, for example.
No, we definitely ran it by him because you guys had mentioned that last time too. So we had ran it by him because they work closely with our architects.
Right.
So
house designers.
Sorry.
They work closely with your house designers.
Yeah.
And then
sorry, Nicholas, go ahead.
No, I mean that was one of the main things. I just want to make sure because it's not so apparent in the front elevation. It's more apparent actually on page 2 on the what is that? It says right elevation. So I think it's the south elevation in reality.
Right would be east.
East.
I think. I'm not sure.
Sorry, I'm trying to get, but it just is on the on page 2 of the presentation, A2. Yes. So if you see that, I just want to make sure that you see the long column in front of the stairs, how it just goes from stairs all the way up, just to make sure all of that kind of just works. Because it goes all the way up, and then there's kind of this really thin roof line. So again, I'll put it out there that it's a comment. I don't know if it's something that needs for it to come back. It's just more for the applicant. Do your due diligence because it'd be unfortunate to do all this work and realize that you have to change the roof line all over again.
100%.
I think you'll find there'll be a beam along that front porch that's not shown on the drawings there, but you'll get there.
Yeah. Other than that, I think it's come a long ways. I think generally, again, what Rashir had said before, I mean, the staircase needs to be jutted into the driveway, so look up for those kind of things. They're coming out. I don't see a rear elevation in the drawing set that you provided.
Next page.
But I assume it's
been
resolved.
Well,
oh no, sorry, it is there. My apologies, it is there. Sorry, it is there. I missed that. I skipped over A3. Yeah, so that again, and probably beating the bush here, but that would be the main thing I'd go back to is first, I guess, update your site plan so it matches your landscape plan, which is always very important. Double check your grades and your staircases so they don't jut out into your driveway or someone's going to scratch the car a lot. And then, but more importantly, just triple check your design with your structural engineer so you don't go halfway up your building and you realize you gotta change it all.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas. And who is next? Rashir, did you give your comments already? You did. And so we'll move to Sharon.
Okay, so in what we are as a panel are, I think, going to be seeing a lot more of these coming forward and changes. Our world is changing quite drastically. And what we are hoping for is some gentle densification, which means we need to really think about allowing laneway homes, duplexes. And it's a challenge to build a duplex that doesn't look like a monolithic house that is large enough to accommodate. And back in the day, duplexes were considered pretty tacky and low end. So we're building better homes. We're taking a very large single family home and on a lot and be able to have two really good sized homes on the same, and they're sharing. And I agree with Paul that the garage doors, you don't have to make one side purple and one side orange to make it look like two houses. You can make a really beautiful address. So it's like, there's one door with this address and that door with that door. Clearly it's two homes. without having to go, we have to have 2 different garage doors to make it look like 2 different houses. So I think from a design aspect, the garage doors should be the same because I don't like that part of it. That's my opinion. Does this home have 9-foot ceilings?
Probably.
Is that part of the,
Let me just check.
excuse me, is that part of the design?
It's probably higher, but
9 or 10 or whatever, somewhere.
I don't believe any of the floors are 10, but I
it's
believe
9. Yeah,
So
I'm
it's
looking
not-
here.
So
9.
we're in a transitioning neighborhood, and the house next door was built in the 70s. There's a rancher. No one, excuse me, no one had 9 or 10-foot ceilings. So the other thing is that we have an added floor. It's very hard to have it fit in to the neighborhood when the house next door is probably going to be knocked down and they're probably going to build another duplex at some point in time. So I think it's really hard to keep the scale because it's going to be a different scale. And with 9-foot ceilings, it's hard to do. So I appreciate the scale. I'm not against it in any way because I'm totally in favor of this kind of construction happening. But I just wanted to make that comment that we can't fit into a 1970s house next door. It's just not going to happen. And this is what's going to be happening moving ahead. And the artist rendering, just to make a comment, is the artist rendering is also an artist rendering. And I think the reason they didn't put the trees in there is you wouldn't have been able to see the house. So the whole point of this is for us to look at the house, not necessarily the landscaping here, but there does need to be some comment made that it's not exactly as per the plans. So I get that. But that's my comment as to why I think the trees aren't on here. We wouldn't have been able to see the house. So that's all.
Great. Thanks, Sharon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sharon.
Yeah. So, any comments for our guest?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I do have a couple comments. One, I think the garage doors should be similar. These are two totally different. One is more contemporary and the other one is like a garage door from, 1990 or whatever. So they need to complement. So if you want to have one, they can either be both the same, but it just really sticks out in my opinion, aesthetically. Also, there was a page, I think it was the first page where he actually showed the design. If we can go to that. One thing that stuck out for me. No, not that
So
one.
which
sorry.
plan? The elevation or?
The one where they showed the driveway.
Oh, the site plan.
So site there, yes.
Oh, that
there.
one. Okay.
That one, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So the house on the right, if you look at the balcony panel, the glass,
Mhm.
it's higher. Why is that?
Oh, yeah, at the base.
The railing is higher. It doesn't. So something about this design, it's like two different concepts coming together as one. And I think I don't know if that's supposed to be an issue or not, but I think it needs a little bit of tweaking.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely higher. I mean.
Oh, it's showing it as higher. You are correct. And it's also kind of lifted off of the floor.
Yeah,
I think that might be a drive.
The top balcony kind of goes right into the roof on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Do you see that? And I don't think that's definitely not supposed to.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
I
Paul?
do.
Yeah.
And Joe, like it's going into the roof.
Yeah, there's definitely some
So
detailing
yeah.
that they have to work through and resolve. But
You're
you're
about
quite
the
right.
balcony. Two different height balconies.
Yeah, and then you mentioned about the soffit. So when you look at the doors, the entrance of the door,
Mhm.
the distance above the door to the soffit is
Amazing. Yeah.
it's just it's really it's kind of off.
The high forehead.
And
Pardon me?
and Yeah.
High forehead.
Yeah, high forehead.
It's
Yeah.
weird. Yeah, it's very weird.
And this, if you guys recall, this was part of the initial discussion that we had for those who were there, for those who were with us last year, that there was a few oddities in the proportion, as well as questions on structural, questions on scale that we saw reflected in the minutes. But I think that ultimately, how much it can be adjusted from what it is to where it needs to be, I guess really is the question that we've got in front of us here today, right? So before we go on, are there any other comments? Have I missed anyone? Any hands up for comments? Because I'd like to give a few.
Oh,
Go ahead. Oh,
I
sorry.
have one more comment too, and I just
Sure.
wanted to ask. So on the second floor, on the duplex on the right-hand side, they have a balcony, a lot of light coming in, and they have another window, which is above the doorway. The other house, there's absolutely no light.
Yeah.
So the duplex on the left-hand side, there's no light coming in on the second level. I don't know.
Oh, that the front is a vaulted area over the living space at the entrance.
Okay, so is that a second floor though? It's a vaulted second floor?
Well, just kind of a double height area, it looks like. Vaulted ceiling, they're calling it.
Okay.
Hopefully this doesn't set the standard for future duplexes.
Well, again, that is the question today, right, guys? I think that there was one more hand up. Phil, did you have your?
Are we on comments or questions?
Well, I think given the brevity of this one, most of the questions have been asked, but if you have another one in addition to your comments, I'm sure that's fine.
Well, it's more of a comment. Having been on this, and I'm trying to remember it from back in last July, I think they've made a lot of, there's more detail. I think they've tried to address the comments that we made, whether or not they still stand or not. Like things are interrelated. For example, the reason for there was a question for differentiating and including the garages because they stood out without with very little landscaping in the front. They just looked like big, huge doors. They just stood out to the street. And that's, I think, one of the reasons, although the minutes aren't clear about this, about differentiating. So I guess there's an issue about how we behave as an ADP and on changing our opinions or not. But things are interrelated. So that's sort of a general comment. I think Sharon raises some good points. This is going to happen an awful lot more. At some point, we need to be clear about what our purpose is here. And I think that if I was an owner here, first of all, this is costing them money to keep coming back to us. But on the other hand, they're getting a lot of great free advice from the architects and landscape architects here. So, it's a mixed blessing to come to the ADP. I guess as a general comment, because my focus, I leave it to mainly to the architects here and landscape architects and some of the technical details. Even though I'm an engineer, I'm not going to get involved in some of the structural issues because I think it'll get resolved. They're not going to build it in properly. The question is, does it fundamentally change the design? But here's my question and comment. And if you can go back to the rendering, and then I'm going to shut up because I have a fire alarm drill here that I'm going to respond to in 15 minutes. So if you can go back to the rendering, here's my basic question, which is, I think, extremely important in terms of the streetscape. Look at, I don't know how accurate this is. I've been to the area, but it was a year ago, to that street, and I'm not sure how accurate it is relative to the houses to either side, but the space. So as a question, I asked about what happens on the sides of the house, and if that's accurate, that they're relatively close to each house, and you build the existing houses there now, and if you build duplexes there, similarly in the future, and you build a wall, a fence, a cedar, any type of fence between the two, I think it fundamentally changes the streetscape about dividing people up. I actually like the look of this in terms of there's grass between the two. The two neighbors can share mowing the lawn. So it's just a comment that I was asking questions about what was there, but my basic comment is I'd rather see neighbors next to neighbors enjoying each other's properties and working things out. So I'm not actually in favor of a fence between homes that divide people up. So this is a question for Greg, I guess, are there any rules? Yeah, these are a little bit further apart though. That's what's there now. Yeah, but look at thank you for sharing that. But you got trees in between. So now you're gonna, anyway, gives a much better sense. But look at what's going to be between those homes. Anyway, it's just a comment. Does the city have any guidelines or design principles with respect to fencing?
No, we don't, Mr. Chair.
I would assume there's just requirements for heights within front yards. Typically, it's 4 feet in the front, 6 in the back. I think that just realistically, Phil, you'll have a hard time convincing people not to put up fences these days.
Okay.
But that said, that
between the owners. I'm just saying that
no worries.
Yeah, I just made
commendable for sure. The idea, I think, this image that Greg's put up there, Street View, tells us how much the rendering, in a way, is a bit of a disservice to us, because it's showing this kind of bucolic kind of neighborhood scene, which actually does not exist here. I'm not saying it's not a nice neighborhood, but it certainly isn't representing what's there to me. But we'll leave that for another day.
Thank you. So
any additional?
Can I just? Yeah, I'm just going to, because I am going to get the fire drill in a few minutes. So
sure,
Phil. Apologies, but if I leave, or when I leave, because this may go for more than 10 minutes or about 10 minutes, you'll still have a quorum.
We do.
Okay, so I will just leave my view there that while there always will be increased issues, I'm supportive of this. I don't think they need to come back to us. I don't know what the motion will be. And I would leave it, there are comments. I think that the owners and the staff can handle them. I don't think this needs to come back a third time to ADP. That's not a vote because I don't have a motion yet, but just expect me to leave as soon as the bell rings.
That sounds good, Phil. So we'll leave it at that for your involvement, and thank you. Good luck. So back to the panel then. Any other comments before I give my final comments? Sharon, your hand is up. And you're.
Yeah, I just want to make a real quick comment. Again, going back to the fact that in the future, this is going to be happening more and more. And it is imperative that our city directs clearly how this is going to happen. Quite a few years ago, we didn't have a single duplex coming forward. When it did, everyone was dead set against it. Moving ahead, there's going to be a lot more. We need to be really clear about it, because the costs is going to the consumer. If we want to have housing that's being built that is going to allow a single family home to be 2 homes, if we keep dragging this out and making it confusing. Now, I know we're trying to, we're at the cusp of the change. We have to be really clear about what we like and what we don't like, because this is costing the developers more money and the consumer will have to pay. So we have to allow, obviously, some design work has to be done. And if they're following the guidelines and doing everything else, I guess we need to be clearer to guide and help to get this moving, because we need this housing. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. So on that note, and I do appreciate those comments, I will provide mine unless anyone else. Looks like no. Couple of things, and one I just touched on with that Street View. Now I'm on it and can't get off it, because this isn't something for the applicant. This is more like for us to consider to look critically at what we're looking at when we're presented with a rendering. The reality is much different than the rendering. But I would say generally, and perhaps this goes to Sharon's comment as well, trying to define something, like I kept seeing in the text here in the letter from Prab about West Coast modern look. It's, you know, these are all judgment calls or personal preferences on how people interpret different styles. To me, it doesn't mean that. It just because for other aspects of it, it goes deeper than that. So I think that ultimately there needs to be some clear definition or understanding about what White Rock is looking for, so that we can move towards it as a panel. But that's more of a side note. For the applicant and what they've done here, I can certainly see that they've made some adjustments over the last year. I will say that some of them are kind of move in the direction of what we were looking at, and I often feel like sometimes applicants walk away from an ADP meeting thinking they've got a checklist, and something like the garage doors, it wasn't meant to be a yes or no. It was meant to be consider overall design approach. And so I understand that with applications that aren't necessarily coming from architectural firms, but more on the house designer side, that sometimes the nuances of what we're talking about as a sophisticated panel are sometimes lost. So I would just like to have that on the record to say this is not a checklist scenario. This is just a regroup and look at the comments of the ADP in context of what we're saying, and then respond to it in a design. It's too simplistic to simply say things like that. Within their response that we do see, you know, I do appreciate the lowering of the roof on the left-hand side in the renderings previously over the front porch of the left unit. In the renderings previously, it led one to believe that there was a very clear visual relationship between this house or this duplex and the neighbor to the west, which is clearly not really the case if you look at the Google Street View. But nevertheless, it looks like they have, within their capabilities, addressed a lot of our comments. So I will say that just from a design perspective, I do worry about the kind of cacophony of materials and interesting use of materials that aren't typical to the way we apply stone, for example, in more traditional architectural design. But it is what it is. You know, they've responded to our comments. We can only ask so much of them. You know, we can't make a house designer an architect, for example. You know, they have to work towards that, and we're not quite here with this one. But I don't know that I would want to see it again. But I would be careful to say, and Paul had mentioned this, that you know, we are setting a precedent, saying, well, the next developer might say, well, this is exactly what you approved next door. This is exactly what we want to produce as well. So slippery slope, and I'll leave it to the panel to come to a motion on that. So
Joe,
Bashir, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to make a very quick comment here to you to put our heads together on the same issue that you're talking about. This is definitely not there where we would like to see it to be, where the next door guy can say that you approve this. Also, there's even it's a small project, but these are the blocks that define our streetscape. So a level of sophistication we would feel is required. But again, we cannot ask this to come back again and again to the panel. So how do we resolve this dilemma?
Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, Greg, I'll take that lifeline.
I don't have a solution for you, but a couple of the things that I'm hearing as I'm hearing the comments, and quite honestly, like I ride my bike to work fairly frequently, and I look at these new builds, and modern design, and how that relates to our DP guidelines. And I think a comment that Sharon made that really resonated with me is we need more explicit and detailed guidelines as it relates to our standards for duplexes and eventually for triplexes in White Rock specifically. And I'm hearing you loud and clear on the constant references to West Coast design, because quite honestly, I'd probably buy a coffee table book if anyone writes one about what West Coast design is. So
I've got a few. I'll give a
okay, sounds good. But I think that I've again been taking notes as you've been commenting, seeing some of the things that you see naturally as architects and landscape architects. Just for the benefit of all panel members, something I've been talking with Joe about is eventually getting to the point where we're so happy with the design that we're going to register a covenant on title as a condition of the rezoning that would require that design to be carried through to a building permit. Because right now, if we don't have a covenant in place, we have the development permit. And so what we do with the development permit is we attach all the architectural and landscape designs. So they get registered on title. So there is that there. But I want it to be clear that what we're approving through the development permit that you're providing comment on is something that we're going to ultimately want to see on the ground. So if this isn't cutting the mustard, then I want to get to a design that we as a community are going to want to see on the ground. I'm hearing some things that are problematic. I feel like I can work with the applicant through some of these issues. I've taken notes and you'll have the chance to review them. But I don't want us to settle for something subpar, and that's my own personal opinion.
So, so a small thing here. Yes, you talked about the standards being set and all that stuff, which is good. But I guess eventually the finesse of design is not that something can be defined very clearly. There's so many small little items that need to come together to form a reasonable clarity in design. So I don't know how can that be achieved. Now, Architects Act does not require this to have an architect. For example, Joe was talking about architectural firms versus house designers. Architects Act does not require this to have an architect. So I don't know. I'm at a loss. How do we kind of get a reasonable amount of sophistication? I'm not saying most design
But I guess
firms.
if you use Vancouver as, I mean, Joe would know as well because you do a lot of housing. I mean, if you use Vancouver as a reference, as one example, is they do have very thick document guidelines about how to design a house if you want to hit a certain square footage.
Yep. They have duplex design guidelines that are very
And,
explicit.
you know, in every zone, these, you know, if you're in this zone, we want this kind of character looking house. If you're in this zone, and they give you incentives to do it. I mean, that's Vancouver's way of doing it. If you want a little density bonus, follow these rules, kind of thing.
It seems to me in the past that White Rock had a kit of parts having to do with small single-family dwellings. And there's an example of them along near the hospital. I can't remember what street it is, but they were all really, they're quite well-designed little houses. And it seemed to me that once upon a time, there was a kit of parts that the designer could go to and say, this is the way you design the front entrance. These are the roofs. These are the materials we like to see, but there were examples for the designers to look at. Now, the same approach could be done for duplexes, I'm sure. Here is an example of what should be done. This is the scale, and it's not that difficult. And I suppose Vancouver has a similar deal. I don't know. Lately, I drive down State Avenue to Marine Drive. And on the left, you have some buildings that are on Surrey's land that are absolutely atrocious. And God help us if that ever happened in White Rock. I think I'd resign. I don't know whether you're aware of those, Greg, but they're pretty bad. They're all panelized with black, like grid patterns on it. Just terrible things. But I suggest you all go and have a look at those to see what really bad architecture is like. So, but anyway, kit of parts for duplexes probably wouldn't be a bad idea. You could get somebody to sketch them up.
Right. No, indeed. That would be helpful. Sharon, do you have an additional comment?
One other comment I wanted to make that I forgot to say was, yes, it was helpful to bring up the Google Maps. However, some of them, I don't know how up to date that is. So I'm just look at those things all the time. And some of them are so, you know, like the picture was taken 10 years ago. That's not necessary. So I'm just cautioning you to say, if you're making this decision based on that Google Maps picture that was brought up, I don't even know how current that is. So, no, but you know what I mean? So like, we do have to be very careful with that. And I guess, Paul, what you're talking about is like a subdivision plan, but that was the hospital lands, and it was very clear about what they were allowing. The driveways go down, there's a suite in them. They were very specific, so they could do a subdivision plan. But this is going to be more spotty. But yes, if they could do something like that for duplexes and go, these are, and then duplexes do come to the ADP. Single family homes don't come to the ADP. So that's beauty. So that's and some people are building their own houses and it's their colors they want to do. It's no one's business, kind of, in a way. So there is, as soon as it's a duplex, it comes to the ADP. So we do need to be able to, but we have to be careful. And in places like Vancouver, which is actually not the best example, it's taken them, 3 to 5 years to build a frickin' house. You know how expensive. So again, this all goes down to the consumer. This is one of the things that we're trying so hard to stop, the bureaucracy that is stopping houses being built. So we do have to be very careful. Guidelines are one thing, but if you make them too specific, then nothing can be built. No one agrees on anything, and then the consumer suffers. So caution.
But I should say, and to your point, Sharon, in Vancouver, so in all of the RS zones, they do allow for outright duplexes. So the reason why they've done their design guidelines so tightly is so that there doesn't have to be a concerted effort to review the design, because the expectation is it's already meeting those guidelines, and then it's just reviewed by staff. So they're circumventing this whole process that we're in. And I think that White Rock might be, in terms of how many years behind in terms of development as a city is just different, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we can talk about that. Perhaps we should move to Prab's project here, back again, cut them loose, as it were. I think that this discussion is a good one. There's philosophical discussion that we have for sure, perhaps as an agenda item to see how we can be effective as a panel moving forward in these types of projects. But for now, I would ask the panel, is there a motion for this particular applicant that we can discuss and vote on?
I'd like to put a motion.
Okay.
Yeah, as much as we would like not to see it again, I think this requires a review again. I would not be able to approve this to go ahead.
Okay, and can I have a second for that motion, please? From Paul, thank you. And calling the vote then, Nicholas?
Yeah.
Supporting the motion to have it back or against the motion?
Oops. I'm to be honest, I'm a bit torn. Whoops, sorry, my phone's going crazy.
Okay.
I don't know why you're doing that. Go. Yeah, I'm a bit torn, to be honest. Where it's tough, like you had mentioned before, Joe, and comment is the expectation, I guess, when you're working with a design company versus an architect, and the expectations that we all have in the design and designs and the drawing sets. But yeah, I'm gonna say there's been enough comments that I think it should come back. Also, I'll support
okay.
Cheers motion.
Okay, and Faye?
I agree. I think there's been enough comments. I think it should come back, but I'm just trying, I wasn't involved with the first one. Why has there been such a delay?
It's on the applicant side. This is the first we've seen.
Okay, yeah. No, it does. I don't think there needs to be that much of a delay, so they could make the changes, work on them, and hopefully present it. Yeah, there's just, when I look at timeframes, I just trying to understand why was there such a delay in the second presentation, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was 11 months ago, you're quite right, but I've logged you as supporting the motion. Paul?
Yeah, I support the motion.
Okay, and I do too, so that's unanimous then. I think that, we really do have to insist on sophistication. First, developments that arrive on a block set the tone for the expectations of the entire neighborhood, without a doubt. I think that it is therefore incumbent on us to make sure that our neighborhoods are, there's not only an aesthetic to them, but it's just how they make you feel about your neighborhood. and the pride that you would feel in it. And I think that that's important. So Prab, unfortunately, there needs to be a little bit more refinement. We thank you for your presentation, and you will be receiving notes from Greg moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right, folks. That is the last item on our agenda. So without any further ado, I will close the meeting. It's 6:07. Thank you for coming and thank you for talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
Oops. Oh,